Okay, let's talk just a little bit about the FMCSA Drug and Alcohol Random Testing Program. A lot of what I'm saying is for the employers, but drivers, pay attention because your employer just may not be doing it right. Wouldn't hurt for you to know. Employers, make sure that only your truck drivers that do safety sensitive work are on the random list. I've seen some people who decide, well, I'm going to get my office people in there too. That kind of way I make sure whether they're doing drugs, keep them honest. It doesn't work that way. Do the drivers only. You also want to make sure that we do that 5-panel drug test. Another mistake I saw is a guy, he started a trucking company. He said, I'm going to go above and beyond what the FMCSA requires. I'm going to do a 10-panel. We're going to test for a whole lot more drugs. We're going to do a great job above and beyond. FMCSA only recognizes the 5-panel drug test. And so when they audited him, as far as they're concerned, he didn't do any of them. So make sure you're doing that. Owner-operators, you have to be on the random list too. And you can't just kind of draw your own name out of the hat. So you need to be part of a consortium. In fact, one place I was safety director had 200 trucks. Another place had 500 trucks. I still used the consortium. They helped me with all the paperwork. They drew the randoms, and if I needed help finding a place to get testing done, at the end of the year they supplied all that paperwork or the information to where I can send the report to the D.O.T. It helps. So don't be afraid to use a consortium to help you along. Just make sure that when you send somebody on a random, the way the law says it, once you tell them they have to go on their test and they are to proceed immediately to the testing site. Now, I always told people you have 2 hours to go. That was kind of my rule, and that's not exactly the way, that's not exactly proceeding directly to the site. But nobody ever gave me any problem for it. But I always told them, make sure you're there at the clinic in 2 hours. And if you're not going to be there in 2 hours, make sure you can call me if you're not going to be signed in. If your car breaks down, then give me a call. We're going to take care of your car. Don't go calling a mechanic and a wrecker and then call me 5 hours later and tell me you haven't gotten the test done, because then I'm going to put you down as a refusal. A refusal will ruin your career. Just remember alcohol testing. Once you tell somebody, if you're going to tell a driver on the road, for instance, that, I need you to stop at Little Rock and get your drug testing done, you might get away with that if that's a few hours down the road. But if you're going to tell them they have to have that alcohol test done too, that has to be done within 2 hours. And once again, the law really says they have to proceed immediately to the testing site. I wouldn't take any chances. Get in touch with them when they can get right to the clinic. Let them know. Go immediately to the testing site and get the testing done. Make sure your company, if you're just starting a company or something, have a few drivers. Make sure you have somebody designated as the DER, the designated employee representative, and that way they are the ones who can deal with the medical review officer if there's a positive. They're also the ones who are that have the authority to take the driver out of the service if there's a positive. Okay, there are a couple of different ways to do it. I always had my randoms drawn monthly. I know a lot of people have it done quarterly. It was easier for me to do monthly, but the regulations say it has to be spread out evenly throughout the year, and that was the best way for me, monthly, quarterly, whichever you prefer. But make sure make sure you have all those drivers. If it's monthly, for instance, make sure they are all tested during that month. If it's quarterly, make sure they are tested during that quarter. Even if they're tested the day after you miss it by 1 day, you're still in violation. They're not going to be very happy with you if you're audited. So make sure they're tested during that period of time. Keep your DOT and your non-DOT tests separately. It's kind of something I talked about earlier when this guy was doing the 10-panel test. In fact, the DOT is so picky about this. If you're going to do a DOT test, and let's say you're going to get this DOT random done with a 5-panel, and you say, well, I'm going to do a non-DOT test too, which is going to be a 10 panel, then the law, they have to be separate. In fact, the law says that the clinic will even have to take that urine sample from the DOT test and pour it out and use a separate sample for the non-DOT test. So make sure they kept separately. I was a strong believer in non-DOT testing because you were only allowed to give somebody a drug and alcohol DOT mandated test if it's mandated. You can't just kind of dream it up that I want him tested for something because I think he just looks like he's on drugs. You can't do that unless it's mandated. You can't use that as an excuse. Now, your supervisors need to be trained for reasonable suspicion testing, and so they need to go through the proper training. I've talked about that in another video. It has to be documented. So keep the DOT and the non-DOT testing separate. Okay, there's another thing about random testing. So you have your randoms pulled, and I'm going to use my example of monthly. And if for some reason you look at one of those names and the guy, he went on a long-term leave last month and he's not going to be back for 3 months, okay, then what you would need to do in that case is go ahead and take him out and get an alternate for that driver. However, if this driver comes and he's pulled on the random like that, and this is one reason to go ahead and get them done expeditiously as quickly as you can, because the law says that you cannot do an alcohol test unless they are performing safety-sensitive duties, about to perform safety-sensitive duties, or just came off safety-sensitive duties. The drug testing, you can do anytime you want to. They're on the random, and all of a sudden, 3 weeks into the month, and they decided, I'm just going to call and going on vacation. Well, you can pull them off vacation for the drug test. You can't do that for the alcohol test. But you can bring them in from vacation, from home, whatever the case, for the drug test. Again, even if they're on vacation and you advise her on the random drug test, then they have to proceed expeditiously. Everything they do has to be moving forward to get that drug test done. And I would recommend you have that written in your policy when they hire on. I mean, it's the regulation, but I would recommend you don't let it catch them by surprise. You're apt to have a driver, not know the rules, and and this is one of the reasons I do these videos for the drivers too. Driver not know the rules, and they say, well, hell, they can't pull me off vacation. I'm not going to go. I'll go next week. Well, they can take you off vacation, and you will go down as a positive and ruin your career. So make sure. Again, my recommendation is pull the randoms, get them done as quickly as you can. But if something happens, they go on vacation, they get injured, they're on work comp. As long as they can leave the house, get them a taxi or something to the clinic. They're not in ICU. Well, get that random test done. Okay, another thing about randoms, a lot of drivers don't know about, because I'm constantly hearing the fact that, wait a minute, you're picking on me. I've gotten drawn 3 months in a row. And usually if you look, it wasn't 3 months in a row. Maybe it was 3 out of the last 7 months. I don't know. But every time that name is drawn, once it's drawn, it goes right back into the hat, manner of speaking, to where they have the equal chance of being drawn, their name being drawn next time. By the way, speaking of the hat, if you only have a few drivers, you're not allowed to do it by drawing names and putting them in a hat and have somebody pull them out like that, drawing straws. That can't be. You have to use a computer generator or something that's more official, drawing their social security number or something like that. Keep in mind, I talked about the alcohol testing. They have to be performing safety-sensitive duties, about to perform safety-sensitive duties, or just finished doing safety-sensitive duties. And it pretty much says that's from the time the driver begins work or is required to be in readiness. He's at the shipping plant, the terminal, the facility, or even on public property waiting to be loaded, or waiting to be dispatched. Keep that in mind, that is safety-sensitive duties. Now, if you want to, if they get to a place and they're going to wind up sitting there for a few hours, and you tell them, okay, I'm going to relieve you from duty for a few hours, well, then that would not be safety sensitive work. Now, keep in mind, the driver can't just, you're going to lay him off, take him off duty for 3 hours. He can't just run down there and drink a beer when he's supposed to be working in 4 hours. So. And finally, if a driver does test positive, then you are required to send him what I call a SAP letter. You are supposed to advise him that he tested positive, that he's broken the FMCSA rules, and that by law, for him ever to get back in the good graces of the D.O.T., he has to go to a counselor, a substance abuse professional, which is going to, interview him and depending on all the circumstances, send him a minimum of 6 tests throughout the next year. I mean, it can be 15 if they want it to be. They might make it through the next 2 years, 3 years. Depends on what the substance abuse professional says. So make sure and send him a letter. I used a website, I believe it was called SAP List. But, send him the information that he's going to have to do this, and go ahead and provide him with a few names of substance abuse professionals. What I would generally do off the SAP list, you can put in their zip code, for instance, and it will give the SAPs in the area. And I would print out the names of 3 SAPs that he can go to. A lot of times they're in 10, 20, 50 miles of his area, and then mail it to him. I always did a certified mail so I could prove it was done, and keep that in your records. So anyhow, there's a lot of things about the FMCSA drug testing program. I can't go through all of it. These are some of the highlights. I appreciate your time. Tips and tales from a trucking safety director. I'm Danny Drummond. See you next time.